Welcome to Bloomwood, Kentucky, where secrets bloom, gossip grows, and mysteries have a way of finding me. I'm Iris Thorne, and this is a Thorne Sister Sleuths cozy mystery. Previously on Buttercups, Barbecue, and Burglary, a Thorne Sister Sleuths cozy mystery by D.G. Thomas. What began as a joyful Father's Day fundraiser at Bloomwood Baptist Church quickly turned into a mystery when more than $7,000 vanished from the church donation box. As rumors spread through town, Pastor Earl quietly asked Poppy and me for help. Our investigation led us to Trustee Calvin Denton, whose secret meetings and family history made him look increasingly suspicious. But just as we thought we were getting close to the truth, someone left a threatening note at Blossom Thorne warning us to stop digging. Now, the mystery continues. Part 2. Let it go, or somebody you love will get burned. Mama used to say that whenever somebody tells you not to dig, it usually means they've buried something. The morning after we found the threatening note taped to the flower shop door, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Let it go, or somebody you love will get burned. Not exactly subtle. The note sat on the consultation table between a vase of sunflowers and a stack of sympathy order forms while Poppy and I stared at it over coffee. Dolly stood nearby with both hands planted firmly on her hips. Her bright turquoise earrings swung as she shook her head. That was never a good sign. What? Poppy asked. Dolly narrowed her eyes at the note. Whoever wrote this ain't scared of getting caught. Poppy stopped sweeping the floor and looked at Dolly. You think? She said sarcastically. No, baby. Listen. Dolly continued while she tapped the paper with one brightly painted fingernail. They're scared of y'all finding something. I looked up. That was exactly what had been bothering me. Not the threat itself, the timing. We barely started asking questions, yet somebody was already worried enough to warn us away. Dolly nodded knowingly. Honey, flowers ain't the only things blooming around here. I sighed. There she goes. What? Dolly asked. Getting philosophical before breakfast, I said. Dolly smiled. That's how you know I'm serious. The bell over the shop door jingled. The morning rush had arrived. Within minutes, Blossom Thorne was filled with customers picking up arrangements, placing orders, and discussing the church theft with the enthusiasm of sports commentators covering a championship game. By 10 o'clock, we'd heard enough theories to fill a notebook. The favorite suspect remained Calvin Denton. Nobody seemed particularly interested in evidence. They just enjoyed having somebody to blame. Around 11, Violet arrived with Scott, carrying a coloring book nearly as large as she was. She climbed onto a stool near the consultation table. Miss Dolly? Violet said in her small, sweet, innocent voice. Yes, baby? Dolly answered. Are bad people scared of flowers? Violet asked curiously. Dolly blinked. Because somebody left a mean note in a flower shop, Violet replied. I nearly choked on my coffee. Scott rubbed his forehead. We're still working on filters. Violet considered this, then nodded solemnly. I think flowers are brave. Dolly smiled warmly. You know what, baby? What? Violet replied. Reaching out to hug Violet, Dolly said in her comforting voice. I think they are too. The conversation drifted toward glitter markers and coloring pages after that. But Violet's question stayed with me. Because somehow she'd managed to identify the heart of the problem. Somebody had deliberately brought fear into a place that usually brought comfort, and I didn't like that one bit. By lunchtime, Poppy was ready for answers. Let's go to Ronnie's, Poppy said, seemingly out of the blue. I smiled. You mean lunch. She means information. Well, I mean ribs, I said like it was a matter of fact. That settled it. A few minutes later, we were seated inside Ronnie's rib shack. The smell of smoked meat wrapped around us the moment we walked through the door. Ceiling fans turned lazily overhead. Country music played softly from a radio near the kitchen. The lunch crowd filled nearly every table. And sitting near the back was Ricky Earl, exactly where we'd hoped he'd be. The pastor's cousin was entertaining a small audience while working his way through a plate piled high with ribs. Ricky loved attention almost as much as Dolly loved church hats, which was saying something. Ronnie delivered sweet tea. You ladies investigating again? We don't know what you're talking about. He said, then pointed towards Ricky. Well, if you happen to accidentally investigate him, order dessert. Then he wandered away. Bloomwood wasn't subtle, neither was Ronnie. As we ate, we listened. Eventually, Ricky's voice carried across the restaurant. I'm telling y'all, things are looking up. One of the men at his table laughed. You finally get a job, Ricky? Ricky grinned. Nah, I got something better. What does that mean? Another man asked. Ricky leaned back in his chair. Means I'll be sitting pretty before long. Poppy raised an eyebrow. I nodded slightly. Interesting. Very interesting. Especially for a man who was supposedly struggling to rebuild his life. When we left Ronnie's, Dolly adjusted her colorful scarf and frowned thoughtfully. That boy knows something. I looked at Dolly. You think? I asked sarcastically. Honey, I raised 2 nephews and 3 younger brothers. She waved a hand. I know the difference between confidence and somebody who thinks he's about to come into money. Honestly, she wasn't wrong. Our next stop was Bloomwood Baptist Church, specifically Opal Hightower. If gossip had a patron saint, Opal was probably on the short list. We found her arranging hymnals inside the fellowship hall. She looked delighted to see us. That should have worried us. Girls, Opal greeted us with a smile. Afternoon, Opal, I said. She immediately lowered her voice. I remembered something. Thought about calling you two, so I'm glad you stopped by. My pulse quickened. Poppy leaned forward. What? Opal glanced around dramatically, then leaned closer. I saw somebody near Calvin's truck. I exchanged a look with Poppy. Finally, a real lead. Who? I asked. Opal's expression fell. That's the problem. I blinked. What problem? I can't remember who it was, she said with frustration. My shoulders sagged. Beside me, Poppy closed her eyes briefly. Opal. I know, she continued. The older woman looked genuinely frustrated. I keep trying. What do you remember? I asked. She thought for a moment. Not much. Man or woman? Poppy asked. I don't know, Opal replied. Young or old? I asked. Dressed how? Poppy pressed for an answer. Any answer. She sighed. I don't know. Dolly patted Opal's arm. It'll come back, sweetie. Don't you worry. You think so? Opal replied, looking very hopeful and eager to help. I do. And strangely enough, I believed Dolly. She had a way of sensing things. Not clues exactly. People. And right now, Opal seemed genuinely upset that she couldn't remember. As we walked back toward the flower shop, my phone buzzed. It was Philip. A text. Come back. Found something. That couldn't be good. By the time we returned, Philip had his laptop open across the consultation table. Stacks of printed records surrounded him. My son looked like he hadn't moved in hours. I looked at Philip sternly and folded my arms. Please tell me you remembered to eat. Philip pointed at an empty pizza box. What'd you find? Poppy asked. Philip turned the screen toward us. Property maps, survey records, legal filings. The kind of paperwork capable of causing immediate eye strain. He pointed to one highlighted section. The church property. What about it? I asked. There was a dispute years ago. I sat down. What kind of dispute? Philip clicked another file. The Denton family claimed ownership of part of the land. The room fell silent. I stared at the screen. How much land? I asked. Several acres, Philip replied. My stomach tightened. Several acres wasn't a misunderstanding. Several acres was serious money. Philip clicked another document. The dispute was eventually settled. But? Poppy asked. Philip shrugged. But the records never fully disappeared. Poppy folded her arms. And now Calvin's meeting with developers. Exactly, I said. The room grew quiet, because suddenly Calvin's behavior looked a whole lot more suspicious. The secret meetings, the nervousness, the fear, the land, all of it seemed connected. At that exact moment, Dolly appeared carrying a tray of brownies. The smell of chocolate filled the room. Naturally, bad news always summoned baked goods. Stress brownies, she announced. I laughed. That's a thing? Dolly smiled. They are today, she said. She set the tray down. Her gardenia perfume drifted through the room. The colorful scarf wrapped around her silver curls somehow looked brighter than usual. What'd I miss? She asked. We explained. Dolly listened carefully while slipping onto a chair. Unlike most people, she wasn't studying the documents. She was studying us. When we finished, she frowned. Y'all are looking at the papers. What should we be looking at? Poppy asked. The people, Dolly replied. I smiled. There she goes again. No, listen, she said, pointing a brownie at us. If Calvin wanted that land, why wait all these years? Nobody answered, because it was a good question. A very good question. Late that afternoon, I delivered an arrangement to a law office on the edge of town. On the drive back, something caught my eye. A black SUV sat parked near an empty lot. Standing beside it was Calvin Denton and another man, a stranger. I slowed the van. The two men were talking, not casually, intensely. The stranger handed Calvin a folder. Calvin opened it, looked inside, then immediately closed it again. Even from a distance, I could see tension in his shoulders. Anger, frustration, maybe fear. The conversation continued for another minute. Then the stranger climbed into the SUV and drove away. Calvin remained standing alone, staring after him. Eventually, he climbed into his truck and left. As he pulled away, a gust of wind caught a loose sheet of paper. The page tumbled across the grass. I should have driven away, probably. Instead, I parked. Curiosity and common sense have never been close friends. I crossed the lot and picked up the paper, then froze. Because printed across the top was a company logo, Cherryville Land Development Group, the same company whose business card I'd seen in Calvin's office. Below it sat a detailed property map. One section had been circled in red, the church property. A chill crept down my spine, because suddenly I wasn't sure the missing money was the real story. What if the theft was only one flower in a much larger bouquet? And what if somebody was fighting over something worth a whole lot more than $7,000? If there was one thing Bloomwood loved more than gossip, it was certainty. Folks could spend weeks arguing over the best barbecue sauce, the prettiest church hats, or whether sweet tea should be sweet enough to dissolve a spoon. But give them a suspect? Suddenly, everybody became an expert. By Thursday morning, half the town had already decided Calvin Denton stole the church money. The other half was just waiting for proof. And truthfully, even I was beginning to wonder. The property map I'd found sat spread across the consultation table at Blossom Thorne. Philip had printed copies, Poppy had highlighted sections, and Dolly had brought muffins. Apparently, every investigation required snacks. That's because thinking burns calories, she informed us. According to who? Philip asked. Me, Dolly said without any doubt. That's not a source, Philip pushed back. Dolly folded her arms across her chest and looked at Philip. It is if I'm the one baking, she said. Philip wisely surrendered. The morning sunlight poured through the front windows, casting golden light across the rows of buttercups, waiting to be arranged for weekend deliveries. Customers drifted in and out. Life continued, because that's what small towns do, even when they're in the middle of a scandal. Mrs. Henderson arrived to pick up a birthday arrangement and stayed 20 minutes discussing church politics. Mr. Dawson ordered anniversary roses and spent 10 minutes explaining why Calvin was guilty. Neither conversation was especially helpful. Still, I listened. Mama always said information was like flower seeds. You never knew which tiny piece might eventually grow into something important. Around noon, Detective Merritt stopped by. The Bloomwood detective wasn't much older than me, but she carried herself with the calm confidence of someone who'd seen everything twice already. She glanced at the papers covering our table. Working hard or causing trouble? Poppy smiled. Little of both. Detective Merritt picked up the threatening note we'd received. Any idea who left this? No. You call me if you get another one, she said. We will, I replied. She studied me for a moment. You think Calvin did it? It wasn't a question. I hesitated. Maybe. Merritt nodded. Most of the town does. Do you? I asked. The detective's expression remained unreadable. I think people usually focus on the loudest clue and miss the quiet ones, she said. That sounded annoyingly wise. I didn't like it, mostly because she was probably right. After Merritt left, Poppy tapped the property map. Let's make a list, I suggested. Dolly groaned. Y'all in these lists. Humor me. Within minutes we'd covered a sheet of paper. Reasons Calvin looked guilty. He controlled the donation box. He looked terrified when the money disappeared. He lied about several details from that day. He had connections to a developer. His family had a history with church property. The list was growing longer by the minute, not exactly encouraging. Just after lunch, another customer walked into the shop. Cheryl Langford, the church treasurer. Immediately, every instinct I possessed perked up. Cheryl smiled. The smile never reached her eyes. Afternoon. Hi, Cheryl, I said. She glanced around the shop. Her gaze lingered briefly on the papers spread across the consultation table, then quickly moved away. Interesting. Very interesting. I came to pick up a sympathy arrangement, Cheryl said. Poppy disappeared into the cooler. Meanwhile, Cheryl stood awkwardly near the counter. She looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from carrying worries around like extra luggage. You holding up okay? I asked. Her laugh sounded brittle. As well as anybody can. Neither of us mentioned the church. Neither of us mentioned the theft. Neither of us believed the other. When Poppy returned with the arrangement, Cheryl paid and hurried toward the door. Then stopped, turned back, and said something unexpected. Be careful who you trust." The words hung in the air. Before I could respond, she left. Dolly slowly lowered the ribbon she'd been curling. I looked at her. What? That woman ain't worrying about getting caught. A chill prickled across my skin. What do you mean? Dolly adjusted one of her oversized earrings. She's worried somebody else might start talking. The room grew quiet. Because once again, Dolly's observation made entirely too much sense. Later that afternoon, Poppy and I paid a visit to Calvin. This time there was no pretending, no flower deliveries, no casual questions. We wanted answers. Calvin looked less than thrilled when we arrived, his office door closed behind us. For several moments, nobody spoke. Then Poppy got right to the point. What's going on with the developer? Calvin sighed heavily. I knew this was coming. You've been meeting with them, I pressed on. So, he responded. The church property is involved, I said. His jaw tightened. So, I folded my arms. So, $7,000 disappears, and suddenly you're having secret meetings with developers. For a moment, Calvin looked genuinely angry, not defensive, angry. Those meetings have nothing to do with the missing money, he said defensively. Then explain them, Poppy said. He stared out the window. I can't. That wasn't helping, not even a little. You can't? Poppy repeated. Or won't? I asked. Calvin's expression hardened. I gave my word. The answer only deepened my suspicions. People hiding nothing usually explain themselves. People hiding something usually didn't. As we left, I felt more convinced than ever that Calvin was involved. Maybe not alone, maybe not exactly the way we thought, but involved. That evening, Blossom Thorne closed a little early. Violet had dance practice. Scott was helping transport decorations for an upcoming community event. Philip had volunteered to help move tables. Apparently, our family had become Bloomwood's unofficial labor force. The evening air felt thick with humidity. Fireflies blinked lazily above the grass. For a little while, life felt normal again. Then my phone rang. It was Ricky Earle, which immediately made me suspicious. Hello? Miss Iris. His voice sounded nervous. That was new. What can I do for you? I asked. I need to talk to you, Ronnie replied. About what? I was curious. Not on the phone. He sounded almost fearful. Of course not, I agreed. We arranged to meet at Ronnie's Rib Shack. An hour later, Ricky sat across from me, looking far less confident than usual. He kept glancing around the restaurant, fidgeting with his glass, sweating despite the air conditioning. I leaned forward. What's going on, Ricky? I asked. Ricky lowered his voice. I heard something. My pulse quickened. What? He started. The day of the fundraiser. I waited. Ricky swallowed hard, then spoke. I heard Cheryl and Calvin arguing. The words landed like a dropped vase. What were they arguing about? He explained. I couldn't hear everything. Try, I pushed. Ricky rubbed the back of his neck. They were behind the fellowship hall. Then what? I asked. Calvin kept saying no, Ricky said. I exchanged a glance with Poppy. What was Cheryl saying? Poppy asked. Ricky shook his head. I don't know. You're sure it was them? She continued. Positive, Ricky replied. The conversation raised more questions than it answered, but one thing was suddenly clear. Whatever was happening inside the church had started before the money disappeared. Maybe long before. As we prepared to leave, Ricky called after us. Miss Iris? I turned. Yeah? His face had gone serious. Dead serious. Be careful. A chill slid down my spine. Why? Ricky glanced toward the window. Toward the dark parking lot beyond. Because somebody doesn't want this dug up. The ride home felt unusually quiet. Even Poppy didn't have much to say. Back at Blossom Thorne, the town had gone to sleep. Main Street sat empty beneath pools of yellow streetlight. The flower shop looked peaceful, comforting, safe. At least until I unlocked the front door. The moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. The scent hit me first. Not flowers, not greenery, not fresh-cut stems. Dust, wood, disorder. My hand found the light switch, the shop illuminated, and my stomach dropped. A vase lay shattered across the floor. Papers littered the consultation area. Drawers hung open. The office door stood partially ajar. Someone had broken into Blossom Thorne, and as I stared at the chaos surrounding me, one terrifying thought bloomed. They weren't looking for money. They were looking for something else. Something we had. Something connected to the investigation. There are few sounds worse than breaking glass inside a flower shop. unless it's the sound of your stomach dropping right after you hear it. Standing in the middle of Blossom Thorne, staring at overturned drawers and scattered paperwork, I felt both at once. Poppy stepped in behind me. Oh no. That about summed it up. The consultation area looked like a tornado had decided to shop for stationery. Files littered the floor. Cabinet drawers hung open. A ceramic vase lay shattered beside the register. The scent of roses and eucalyptus mixed with dust and splintered wood. Whoever had done this hadn't been interested in flowers. They'd been looking for something. And judging by the mess they'd left behind, they hadn't cared how much damage they caused finding it. A few minutes later, Detective Merritt arrived. She stood quietly in the center of the room, hands on her hips, surveying the chaos. Anything missing? I glanced around. Not that I can tell. The cash drawer? Detective Merritt asked. I checked. Still there, she continued. What about the register? Untouched. Still more questions. Electronics? Still there. Merritt frowned. So they broke into a flower shop and ignored the money. Apparently, I said. The detective crouched beside the overturned filing cabinet. What was in these files? I exchanged a look with Poppy. Church notes. That got her attention. What kind of notes? The investigation, I said hesitantly, then braced myself for her response. For the first time, Detective Merritt's expression darkened. Now she looked concerned. Not just interested. Concerned. Because suddenly this wasn't just a flower shop theft anymore. It involved the church again. Somebody had crossed a line. The break-in made one thing painfully clear. Whoever stole the donation money knew we were asking questions, and they wanted us to stop. Unfortunately for them, they had inherited the wrong flower shop sisters. By 8 o'clock the next morning, Dolly was marching through the front door carrying a plate of sausage biscuits. The aroma filled the shop instantly. Her silver curls were wrapped in a bright purple scarf that matched absolutely nothing else she was wearing, naturally. Good morning, babies, she said with a big smile. Morning, Dolly, I replied somberly. I brought breakfast, she said proudly. We noticed, Poppy replied equally as down and out as I felt. Dolly surveyed the damage, her expression hardened, then she folded her arms. That was Dolly's version of a thunderstorm warning. What? I asked. Whoever did this made a mistake. Poppy raised an eyebrow. Breaking into the shop? No. Dolly pointed toward a bucket of buttercups. They messed with family. The room fell silent. Because she wasn't wrong. This wasn't just a business. This was home. A place filled with memories. A place Mama had loved. The idea of someone violating it felt deeply personal. A few minutes later, Violet came downstairs. The moment she saw the broken vase, she stopped. Her little face fell. Miss Dolly? Yes, baby. Did somebody hurt the flowers? Violet asked. Dolly immediately knelt beside her. No, sweetheart. They broke things. I know, Violet frowned. That's so rude, she replied. Dolly nodded. Extremely rude. Violet considered that, then pointed toward the damaged consultation table. Can we fix it? She asked. And just like that, she reminded all of us what mattered. Not the damage, the recovery. By lunchtime, the shop looked considerably better. Not perfect, but better. The flowers remained beautiful. The customers kept coming. Life moved forward, because that's what Bloomwood did, even when somebody tried to shake it. Later that afternoon, Dolly announced she had a solution. Whenever Dolly announced a solution, it was wise to prepare yourself. Dolly, I said, folding my arms in disagreement, and shaking my head no even before hearing it. No, listen, she pleaded. She adjusted one of her oversized floral earrings. My cousin Cletus can help. Poppy immediately groaned. Oh no, I laughed. Cletus? Yes, Cletus, Dolly confidently continued. Now, to be fair, Dolly had approximately 47 cousins. At least, that's what it felt like. And most of them possessed unusual skills. One repaired tractors, one raised exotic birds, one claimed he could predict rain using his knees. Cletus, however, was unique. Years ago he'd worked as a locksmith, which sounded respectable. Unfortunately, he'd also spent the last 20 years treating every lock like a personal challenge. An hour later, we found ourselves sitting on the porch of Cletus Gilbert's workshop. The building looked like a cross between a hardware store and a museum. Locks hung from the walls, keys dangled from hooks, metal parts covered nearly every surface. Cletus himself looked exactly like I remembered. White beard, suspenders, magnifying glasses perched atop his head. He greeted us with a grin. Hey cousin, he yelled out and waved, giving Dolly a big hug. Cletus, you still causing trouble? Dolly asked with a grin. You know it, he stood back, chest poked out proudly as he claimed his rightful spot as Bloomwood's troublemaker. We all laughed. If nothing else, family reunions in Bloomwood are efficient. So we had to take some time to bring Cletus up to speed on what's been happening. After hearing the story, Cletus leaned back in his chair. That sounded like Dolly, and worried me. People in Bloomwood thought a lot. The humming usually came afterward. What? I asked. The lock, he questioned. On the donation box. He nodded. What about it? I asked. Cletus rubbed his beard thoughtfully. You said Calvin claimed he locked it? Yes, he continued. And there were no signs of damage? None, I replied. He nodded slowly, then reached for a small metal cash box sitting nearby. Within seconds he demonstrated several ways someone could access it. Some required tools, some required skill, one required almost no effort at all. Poppy stared. Seriously? Seriously, Cletus confidently repeated. My stomach tightened. So, what does that mean? Cletus pointed a finger toward us. It means Calvin's story might be true. That wasn't what I expected to hear. What? The box could have been opened. So Calvin didn't do it? I asked. Cletus shrugged. I didn't say that. Of course he didn't. Nothing in Bloomwood was ever simple. What are you saying? Poppy asked, tired of seemingly pointless clues. He smiled. I'm saying somebody with access and knowledge could have gotten into that box. The words settled heavily between us. Access, knowledge. That narrowed things considerably. Then, Cletus delivered the real surprise. The lock wasn't forced. We know, Poppy said. No, he leaned forward. I mean, whoever opened it knew exactly what they were doing. A chill crept down my spine, because suddenly the theft felt less like opportunity and more like plan. Careful planning. The kind that happens long before the crime itself. The ride back to town was unusually quiet. Everybody was thinking, including me, especially me. Because Cletus's theory kept circling through my mind. Somebody had known how to access that box. Somebody familiar with church procedures. Somebody trusted. Back at the shop, Philip sat waiting at the consultation table. His laptop was open. Several new documents filled the screen. He looked excited, which was never a reassuring sign. What now? I hesitantly asked. Philip said, excitedly, naturally. Good records or bad records? Poppy asked. Depends, he replied. I sat beside him. Philip turned the screen toward us. More property documents, more legal filings, more references to the Denton family. The deeper we dug, the worse Calvin looked. Poppy folded her arms. This can't be coincidence. No, I agreed. It couldn't. At least it didn't feel like coincidence. Not anymore. Then something caught my eye. A note scribbled in the margin of one document. Just a few words. Future development discussion. My pulse quickened. There it was again. Development. Land. Money. The same threads appearing over and over. Maybe Calvin really was our guy. Maybe we'd been right all along. That evening, after closing, I sat alone in the consultation area. The repaired flower shop felt peaceful again. Soft light glowed against the buckets of buttercups. The familiar scent of flowers wrapped around me. Comforting, familiar, home. I picked up the property map from Cherryville Land Development Group, studied it again, and again. Then something occurred to me. A question, a simple one. If Calvin wanted the church land, if he'd been meeting with developers, if he'd been hiding things, why did he look terrified when the money disappeared? Not angry, not surprised, terrified. The memory resurfaced vividly, his pale face, his wide eyes, the fear. Fear of what? The answer felt close, close enough to touch, yet still just beyond reach. And that was when my phone buzzed. A text message. Unknown number. Only 5 words. You're asking the wrong person. I stared at the screen, my pulse thudding, because for the first time since the fundraiser, doubt began to bloom. What if Calvin wasn't the thief? What if we'd spent days chasing the wrong suspect? And if Calvin wasn't responsible, then who was? I've got more to tell you. To be continued in part 3. I think the pastor has something to hide. If you enjoyed this Bloomwood mystery, be sure to subscribe for the next Thorne Sisters story, because around here, trouble has a funny way of blooming when you least expect it. Next time on Buttercups, Barbecue and Burglary. We had a ton of clues, and Poppy and I were sure we knew exactly who was responsible. The problem was, every clue we followed would lead us somewhere completely unexpected. And the closer we got to the truth, the more Bloomwood itself began to unravel. Continue the mystery in Part 3. I think the pastor has something to hide.
Read the Thorne Sister Sleuths Cozy Mystery Series. Available wherever paperbacks are sold and on Audible, Kindle, and free on Kindle Unlimited.